Hey, everybody. Simon Dixon here. Hope we are all live at the moment. And what a crazy week it has actually been. Today, we're going to be discussing the implications of Biden and Trump. Nothing else to talk about really in the current market. And we're going to be covering the policies. I'm going to be covered some of the politics. And we're going to be covering what it actually means for Bitcoin, of course, as well, for those of you that are your Bitcoiners. So we're going to jump right in. So first off, everybody, let me know if all of this is coming through okay. We're just going to look at the live chat. Say hello and let us know where you're coming in from, where you're viewing from. And let me know if there's any issues there. Azad is here moderating as usual. So any issues, he'll let us know. So hopefully everything's all good. We've got an awful lot to cover today. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. Let's start with what we're not going to cover. First thing is I'm not really going to be covering whether Biden's won or whether Trump's won. I know emotions are high for all you Americans out there. I know some of you think it's an absolute fraud, and others of you think that they are absolutely crazy conspiracy theorists and there's not a chance in hell that anything's going to change. I haven't researched enough on that subject to give a decent opinion on it. All I know is I just been focusing on what it means for investors and what the implications are. So I'm not going to be covering that, and I'm sure everyone in the live chat has their opinion. Let us know if you think it's a fraud or if you think that people that think it's a fraud are crazy conspiracy theorists. Love to see your opinion there, and I'll go back to the live chat after I've covered this. And maybe if you have some things that you think I should be researching on the subject, then let me know in the comments section, because I know it's a real heated debate and people feel very passionately about it. So what are we going to cover? Well, I'm going to cover a bit about the politics. Now, what I'm not trying to do here is give you my opinion about whether Trump should be in, whether Biden should be in. I'm not really covering that. I'm just going to give you the implications and what I think's good, what I think's bad, and just try to give you a straight down the line opinion on some of the things that I think are good for the economy out of this election and some of the things that I think are bad. We're also going to start reviewing. Biden obviously reported and published his website on his 4 stated policies, but I'm going to go. I think the policy forecast will be rather than the stated policies. So he's got his 4 stated policies, and I'm going to go through 7 policy forecasts. And then I'm also going to discuss what I think this means for Bitcoin as well. So let's just jump right in. Firstly, the emotions that I've been going through while experiencing it. Obviously, I'm not an American, but the result of the US election affects us all, but only Americans get a vote to determine the future of what many important things are going to happen over the coming years, and the outcome that has and the global impact that has on the world. I do think that this election, I know that every election people think is the most important election ever, but I do genuinely think that this was a really important one. And the implications on the economy and for investors are actually going to be impacted. A lot of, I tend to avoid the noise normally and just think about it from the long-term fundamentals when investing. But I do think the long-term fundamentals are affected by this shifting policy that comes as a result of whether we have Trump or Biden. I also know that it's systemic as well. So whoever's in politics, then there's certain things that can't be reversed. But I do think we're going to have a big reform in the years ahead. So who implements that reform and a philosophical, political, economical view will actually be important in the times ahead. And so some of the emotions that I've been feeling is, the capitalist in me would be supporting Trump, and the humanitarian in me would be supporting Biden. And really, that's the emotional back and forth that I've actually been going through. But what can Biden do better than Trump, and what can Trump do better than Biden? Well, let's start with that. So firstly, I think the fact that, having a woman of color as vice president in a high power position, I do think that just with the general emotion of the world and there's the sentiment of many of the political movements in the world. I do think that can be inspirational to many people, and having a multicultural change and leadership with different demographics is actually inspirational for more people. So there's the humanitarian part. I do think that the peace-led rhetoric that Biden preaches, whether you believe in it or not, and half the time you don't obviously believe in what politicians say, you look at what they do rather than what they say. But I do think a peace-led rhetoric is actually something that is actually needed to try and get past the tough times ahead that people are experiencing. And I do think that Biden's going to do more to repair international relations and their relationship with America. However, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is actually one of the key 2020 debates that we'll be looking at globally, really, because I do think that preventing some of the tensions that could lead to World War III that some people are forecasting is certainly something to be to strive for, but I don't think we're going to prevent some of the currency wars and some of the more aggressive foreign policies that I think you'll see under a Democratic Biden led things can actually lead to less peace and more likelihood of wars. Trump was always his foreign policy was to try and get many troops back to America, and I do believe having American military bases globally is actually something that doesn't really help. So a more socialist, a more democratic, a more Biden-led could actually lead to more aggressive foreign policy rather than a retraction of foreign policy that you would have got under Trump. So what can Trump do better than Biden? I think only Trump really has the narcissistic, protectionist personality that is actually needed in order to do what it takes to protect the dollar and to, really remain some of the status quo. And we have to remember that the world is dependent upon dollars right now. I've often said 70% of all international reserves are in dollars and 50% of international transactions are in dollars. So if you want a more protectionist style of policies for the dollar, then I think Trump would, he's the only one that's got the narcissistic protectionist personality to be able to do that on a scale that no one else could actually do. I think it's also good that Trump, he brought attention to some of the main scale issues that aren't really discussed. And Trump brought attention to corruption in media, corruption in big tech, corruption in big money and politics. And I think those are conversations that should be had, should be scrutinized. And although it led to more hate and more division, those are real conversations that Trump brought to the front. There is definitely things to be looked at in terms of how biased the media is, what the agenda of different media outlets are, and also big technology and big money. So really that brings us back to one of the mantras in it's in Bitcoin space, which is the whole don't trust, verify mindset. And I think Trump brought that conversation to the front. Really getting people to question whether the media, whether tech, whether corporation interests are actually things that we should not trust, and we should try and verify for ourselves. If you believe in Keynesianism, and I've talked about that in other videos, where essentially Keynesianism is that government should step in and stimulate demand in times of hardship. Then Trump created lots and lots of jobs and pumped your 401k retirement plans by actually really significantly increasing the money supply and spending more as a government than under any democratic process, which you'd normally expect to be the difference, with Republicans being more of, rein in the spending and go for tax cuts. But under Trump, he did a fantastic job of incredible amounts of Fed stimulus, pushing people's 401ks through funny regulated Ponzi schemes like the dollar ski, and also created lots of jobs as a result of that. That will come back to bite Biden. And so Biden's going to have to deal with that, but I'm pretty sure that he's going to kick the can down the road a little bit further, double down, and really really Republican or Democratic, both are driving to a more socialist policy due to the systemic nature of fiat money and the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme, really led by the dollar. I think he did some interesting work in terms of peace in the Middle East and some of the things that were negotiated. I think that bringing out more of the US troops, as I said, in foreign policy, these were all positive things, and a more, anti-war mindset that Trump has demonstrated over the years before he got into politics. So overall, what do we need to know from this? So, that was the political side. Well, if you believe in Austrian economics, which a lot of the Bitcoin community believe in Austrian economics, they believe in sound money, they believe in hard money. And if you believe in free markets, then Trump actually sucked. He was an absolute disaster in terms of moving us more to free markets. In fact, the opposite happened. But Biden would be a bigger disaster in terms of moving us more towards free markets, more Austrian economics, and moving towards, maybe a gold standard or Bitcoin standard, which I'll obviously be covering in future videos. But the politics meant that we pushed that aside to more relevant things today. So likely moves to expect next. As I said, the real big debates that are going to be negotiated throughout the 2020s is a debate between global free trade, which I think we can all agree Biden would be a bigger supporter of, versus protectionism. And we can all agree that Trump was certainly a protectionist. He built his campaigns around looking out for the United States, forgetting about global agendas, and really thinking about what is best for America. And that was reflected in his immigration policy and everything. So I think this is going to be the key debate throughout the 2020s, which is global free trade, which is a Biden-led policy, versus protectionism for the United States of America, which is a Trump-led policy. And some of the things that Biden has actually released on his website in terms of what policies he's going to be focusing on. He said the firstly will be a focus on health. Well, Trump very famously questioned the integrity of the World Health Organization. I do think needs questioning, which is a good conversation to have. But Biden's going to put us back into the World Health Organization and really look for a more global way of actually working globally and relying upon more of the World Health Organization policy. So Biden will bring us back into that. Really that I think really means more lockdowns, higher tax, higher regulations, and to push us really into the Great Depression of the 2020s that I've been forecasting as a result of that. If you try to, whichever way you go right now, it drives us into economic disaster. If you try and reverse some of these trends, you get economic disaster because of the impact that you need in order to reverse that. If you continue more of the status quo, in order to protect health at the moment, the policy is lockdowns, higher tax, higher regulations, and a push and movement towards the Great Depression of the 2020s, which all will be funded through central bank digital currencies. So that's how I'm interpreting the policy in terms of health. In terms of Biden's economic stimulus to try and get the economy going again, well, that is more of the same. That is more Federal Reserve-led stimulus. That is more helicopter money. That is more ginormous expansion of the money supply in order to actually stimulate the economy and try and move it out of a depression through more QE-led stimulus, and also some more central bank digital currency-led stimulus that I've talked about in previous videos. The third policy is trade, which means reversing some of the things that Trump did in terms of questioning some of the policies, the trade agreements with China, the trade agreements with Britain, the trade agreements with Europe, and a movement back towards the World Trade Organization agendas, which is trying to repair some of those relationships. But those all push us towards currency wars is the end result. The protectionist policy of Trump focusing on the dollar and focusing on Americans versus the global agendas of World Trade Organization, World Health Organizations, and repairing some of those relationships puts us back into more of the status quo, and I think more likely to lead to an IMF global banking agenda that moves us more towards global digital currencies, global negotiations, and making and facilitating a more socialist agenda under the IMF in order to stimulate and get more loans out globally. As I talked about in previous videos where I did an emergency broadcast on deconstructing the Bretton Woods II announcement of the IMF. The fourth policy is climate change. So Biden has made it clear that he will rejoin the Paris Accord, which is trillions and trillions of expenditure in order to try and reverse some of the negative impacts on the climate. Again, not going into the politics too much, whether you think that climate change is a good thing or a bad thing. But whatever you think, it doesn't matter. We are where we are. Biden will put us back in Paris. Will put America back in us. I guess I've been so involved in this political stuff that I'm actually starting to think that I'm part of it. Put Americans back into the Paris Accord, which again, ginormous stimulus, ginormous amounts of funds needed, and a push towards central bank digital currencies in order to fund some of these stimulus packages. Overall, a movement towards not balancing the books, ginormous amounts of increases in the money supply, more stimulus, and a more Keynesian style of economics in the current market of a depression. And then I don't think that will be reversed if they manage to successfully reverse the fate. So for me, is a movement towards the Great Depression of the 2020s. Those are the four things that have been policies. And so now I'm going to get into what I think the Biden and Fed 7 predictions for 2021 and the next 4 years should this actually be implemented. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen next with some of the thoughts around whether Trump can still actually be in the game or not. As again, I'll leave that for the live chat and for you all to debate that, and I'll come back to that later. The live chat, that is. So 7 policy predictions. I believe under Biden, we will enter into a monetary negotiation. I think under Trump, he would have gone for a more protectionist policy of the status quo and trying to push a US dollar. Under Biden, we're going to move to such levels of unsustainable debts and monetary policies under the Fed that we're going to enter into that new monetary negotiation with the IMF within the next 4 years and Bretton Woods II. I think the whole stage is set for that to come out. I think the second thing that we're going to see as a policy over the next 4 years, we're going to see approval of a stimulus-led US dollar central bank digital currency. It won't have a blockchain in it. It doesn't need to have a blockchain in it, but it will be used, as I've talked about in many previous videos, as a stimulus package in order to get people into a non-debt-based US dollar central bank digital currency. I think we're going to see that within the next 4 years. I think there's no doubt about it. I think we're going to see almost a double of the money supply in the next 4 years. So I think there's going to be ginormous dilution of the dollar and the impact. They're going to be exporting that inflation across China, across Europe, and globally. As I've talked about in previous videos where I talked about the relationship between the monetary flows as the Fed prints more money, and that makes its way through imports and exports into People's Bank of China, and People's Bank of China swaps in some of those dollars purchases treasuries and is accumulating as much gold as possible as a hedge against the US deleting those $1.5 trillion of treasuries that China has on its balance sheet. So I think we're going to see a double over the next 4 years of the money supply, which will lead to significant dilution of those that are saving money in dollars. Third thing we're going to see. Fourth thing I think we're going to see is we're going to see helicopter money too. I think that could happen very quickly. They're either going to hold off in order to do that with a central bank digital currency and ensure that you download the app, or they're just going to use the distribution system under the Trump administration to get out helicopter money again. That will be a stimulus after the next lockdown. I'm sure we're going to actually see. The fifth thing I think we're going to see is the automation of negative interest rates to discourage savers. In order to fund all of this, they don't want savers saving. They want to increase the velocity of money. And to increase the velocity of money, they need to make your savings worth less. And the easiest way of doing that is a policy of negative interest rates so that everybody that's saving can be encouraged to take that money out of the bank and move to a more debt-based stimulus model and more of the status quo. As we've reached towards the end of a debt cycle, you need to have more and more extreme policies. Central bank digital currency is going to be the easiest way of automating negative interest rates and preparing the clearing banks for that policy. And so what you can get the banks prepared under negative interest rates, and then later as banks come under fire and that starts to have an impact on their balance sheets, then you can start to move towards letting the banks go bust, as I talked about in previous videos, and how that can actually roll out. So that's policy number 5. Policy number 6, I think with the US will lose a lot of major businesses due to some of the tax hikes. So Biden said that he'll be taxing the ultra wealthy and large corporations. I think that leads to a policy that Trump was quite right, where even though it might seem like the right thing to do, it might seem like the fair thing to do, it also will lead to some of the major corporations and some of the wealthy people leaving America to prevent having to pay, these big tax hikes that will happen to the wealthy and large corporations. And I think that could be bad for the economy and push us towards the Great Depression of the 2020s that I've talked about. And I think that we're going to see over the next 4 years, approximately $10 trillion of US government debt added to the already astronomical debt that the US government is running on its balance sheet due to the fact that it is operating the world reserve currency being the dollars. So that's the 7 things that I think we're going to see under the Biden administration in order to achieve those 4 goals that he has publicly now stated and published that he will be doing. So just to recap before we jump into what it means for Bitcoin and then move over to the AMA. Enter into a monetary renegotiation with the IMF within the next 4 years through Bretton Woods 2. Policy 2 forecast, approve a stimulus-led US dollar central bank digital currency within the next 4 years. Policy prediction number 3, double the money supply in the next 4 years in terms of US dollars. Policy prediction number 4, increase and issue new helicopter money. That will happen very soon as a policy forecast. Prediction number 5, automate negative interest rates to discourage savers, probably done through a central bank digital currency. Policy prediction number 6, lose major US businesses through tax hikes and wealthy people migrating out of America. And policy number 7, add $10 trillion of government debt within the next 4 years through trying to tackle those 4 policies: health, trade, climate change, and what's the other third one that I'm missing in my mind? Economy, obviously. How did I forget that one? So that's where we enter. Those are the forecasts that I think we will see. A little bonus, I think that we're going to see, just for fun, Trump will definitely blame the Great Depression of the 2020s on Biden. And Trump supporters will say that it was an illegitimate fraud, and that will continue. The conversation on that will continue for the years ahead. But you can guarantee that probably Trump will do as much as he can to make sure that we enter into the Great Depression of the 2020s, because of his narcissistic personality, will want the economy to be as bad as possible onto Biden so that he can say, I told you so, prove the fraud, and try and run again for 2024. So that's what I think is going to happen. That's where I think this plays out. So for all of you Bitcoiners, a little bonus as well. What does it mean for Bitcoin? Well, for those of you that have been following me for a long time over the years, you know that I've always talked about when I wrote my book, Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust, approximately a decade ago. I said that there's three problems with banking, and Bitcoin is the counterculture to those three forces. When you deposit your money at a bank, the bank becomes the legal owner of your money. When they become the legal owner of your money, they spend it as they choose in the debt markets. And when they become the legal owner of money and they spend it, they actually increase the money supply and dilute your savings by creating new money, a new digital currency of the dollar or the pound or whatever, which actually dilutes your savings. So Bitcoin is the counter to that. Bitcoin allows you to own your own money. Whoever owns the private key owns the money. Whoever spends when you have Bitcoin, you can spend it peer-to-peer with no third party in the middle. And so therefore you can transact and spend it as you choose. And the money supply and the monetary policy is fixed, never changes. 21 million, most of them have been created, and we've got big scarcity as more and more corporations look to balance some of their, diversify some of their balance sheets using Bitcoin as a store of value in order to try and do that. So Biden really, the peace and unity comes from a return to the status quo. And a return to the status quo also means, some of the unsustainable things and a movement to some of those policies. So the big debates, I said, war on privacy. So anti-money laundering policies versus GDPR, which is privacy policies. Anti-money laundering is a movement away from privacy. GDPR is a movement towards privacy and protection of data. Well, Bitcoin helps that conversation. So it gives you the ability to own your own money. And so really Bitcoin helps with that privacy debate that we're going to start to see ahead. Under Biden, we're going to see deeper regulations, which also means more aggressive anti-money laundering regulations, which also leads to the innocent people that are not doing any money laundering, having financial censorship and having deeper regulatory control over your money, which also drives people into Bitcoin, giving you the ability to spend your money and only have to deal with that when you convert your money through the on-ramps and off-ramps. So a Biden policy, I think, drives deeper AML, deeper regulations, deeper financial censorship, deeper control. And the third thing, obviously, is stimulus-led markets. Again, we're going to get more of that under Biden, which dilute the dollar, dilute the value of your savings, and leads more people into non-dilutive money, which at this stage is gold, but more non-dilutive is Bitcoin and more inclusive in terms of how people can get involved. So a Biden-led policies and all the things that I've talked about, I think drives us really to bigger war on privacy and the ability and the desire for people to want to own their own money, increasing the utility, deeper regulations and financial censorship, which leads people to wanting to discover Bitcoin and more being able to spend their own money. And deeper stimulus and dilution of the money supply leads people to want to discover non-dilutive money, which drives people to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's utility, I think, is going to be pushed by these three different things and reasons to actually look at this as more and more people realize that it's not a Ponzi scheme. It's not a currency just for drug dealers. It's not a scam, and it's not just to get rich quick scheme, as almost everybody that doesn't believe in Bitcoin will say in the comments below this video. So if you still believe that, then tell me what you think about Bitcoin in the comments below this video, and I'm sure you'll be telling me some of those things. So that's really what I think is going to happen next. I think Trump was more likely to actually call for an outright ban of Bitcoin by the American people. As I said, it's more of a protectionist policy. And it's a type of thing that you could see under Trump. I think under Biden, you're less likely to see such a policy. And less likely to actually lead to a Bitcoin outright ban. So these are the things that I think and what it actually means for Bitcoin. Let me know what you think. And just to give you, I think I saw this in an article. I'm not going to do that. There was an article on CoinDesk today that it was actually talking about what a Biden-led financial policy and what a transition would actually mean. So these things, that's what it was. Sorry, the article that I saw, forgot that one, is that Biden's already started to appoint a blockchain, real blockchain savvy person that comes from the belief of digital US dollar, a blockchain-based US dollar. So we're already starting to see some of that policy implications actually be reflected in the people that Biden intends to put in this. So that's what I expect to see next. How are we doing for time? I know that was a lot to cover. We're all good. We're exactly on the halfway mark. So that gives us plenty of time now to jump into the AMA. So Azad, what have you got for me? You might be on mute if you're speaking right now.
Okay, thank you. We've got a lot of questions come through, and I'll kick off with the first question. Since all our assets are based on USD, is it fair to say that as a public pensioner, it would be better with Trump to save the dollar versus going to a new world currency where all fiat is worthless?
So that really depends upon what type of assets you're holding. So if you are really very US centric in terms of your portfolio, then one might lead to that argument that a Trump-led protectionist policy would be better for your 401k and your pension than it would under Biden. Again, this also leads to the conversation of when you're going to retire, because if you've got a long time left, then obviously all of these unsustainable things can in the short term actually benefit your 401k, but be disastrous in the long term. So this is where a little bit more you need to really contact your financial advisor or really have an understanding of when your time frame, your goals, and I can't give such individualized financial advice. But other people might have built a pension and a retirement plan led around foreign currencies or foreign markets. And so really a renegotiation as we move into currency wars and shifts in political power can actually lead to stimulus there. So some people might decide to hedge with, outside of the US markets in order to protect some of those values there. I'm really happy to say that if you were a shareholder in Bank to the Future, after this video, we're actually sending out the first video of the 4-part video series to shareholders. And part of what I'll be covering in that 4-part video series is what I'm going to be doing with $1 million of my personal savings based upon some of the things that I think are coming next, and also how to protect myself in case I'm completely off the mark in some of these things. So once we've released that to shareholders over the next couple of weeks, we'll be releasing that for everybody. If you head over to retirementplanb.com, then you can get yourself on the pre-registration list. And in that 4-part video series, we'll be covering many of these topics and the implications of what it means and what I think is what I'm protecting myself from to those that are highly exposed to the US markets and dollar-denominated assets. Next question.
Okay, thanks. I think this is an interesting question.
Hey, Azad, actually, just while you get that question,
Yeah,
we haven't done it for a while. The views are really going up on these videos. I'm really excited about where you've helped us get. But to keep that momentum, please do help us out. If you enjoyed this content, hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber to my YouTube channel, we're now 52,000 strong. We'd like to get that to 100,000 by the end of the year. So please do subscribe to this channel. And my promise and commitment to you is that I'll give you as much content as I can give you and make sure that you're first to be notified about many of the things that are coming and what impact that has for you. So do me a favor, the YouTube algorithm likes it when you hit like. So if you've enjoyed this content, hit that like button right now for us. And maybe we can get another 300K plus video like we saw on some of them that got enough likes and comments from you. So really appreciate the community that's really helped us get here. Now let's go to the next question. Sorry, Azad.
No, that's good. We've got about over 900 people watching right now. So since you said it, the likes just shot up.
Wow. Do you remember when we used to have like 50 people watching and, you know, a good video would be 1,000 views? Really, really grateful for where this is going. Thank you to everybody that's getting this message out there.
Yep. Very grateful to that as well. So the question that I wanted to ask, I think is a good question. Globalists are looking for a green new world. So that makes Bitcoin not a safe investment. So it's more of a statement on that. Just wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, not sure I'm fully understanding the correlation. So globalists are looking for a green world. Well, that's a
green new world.
A green new world. Yeah. I don't quite see. Oh, right. I think I know where he's going. He's talking about proof of work and the amount of electricity behind Bitcoin. Well, those are interesting arguments. Saifedean Ammous has done some interesting research, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, on the impact of Bitcoin versus banking in terms of the environmental impact and costs. I don't think that we're going to lead with, well, firstly, no one country can ban Bitcoin, globally. And even if they did ban it, I still think we'd see lots of people mining it and taking the utility in an individual country. But proof of work and the electricity behind it, yes, it's not really forwarding the green agenda. But really, many people have done, research around whether the electricity spent on Bitcoin is more efficient than the inefficiencies of the traditional banking system. And there's some interesting research to be had there. But yeah, it's certainly not something that, the amount of electricity behind Bitcoin as it's moving more and more, to that is certainly something, but there's not a lot that people can do about that. This is a distributed, decentralized network, and anyone can fire up a mining to that. And obviously the altcoiners, and although everyone out there will tell you that they've got an environmentally friendly and proof of stake and all these different things, but I don't think that that's going to ever have any impact in terms of the ability to secure what could be the world's best shot at ever achieving digital hard sound money.
And just a follow-up question to that, do you think Biden's focus on climate change will reignite the debate on the energy consumption usage of Bitcoin and hurt its profile in the public view?
I do think that, at some stage, every attack on Bitcoin, Bitcoin is so anti-fragile because it's had almost every attack, but there's more attacks to be had. And in the future, I'm sure that debate is going to be, as it gets more and more impact, that is something that's going to be brought to try and attack Bitcoin. But, Bitcoin has been attacked from everything that it could possibly be attacked by, it causing pedophilia, causing terrorism, causing criminal behavior. All of them have been, ruled out one by one, but it doesn't stop people trying.
Okay, here's a question which I read quite often. Do you see a breakthrough in quantum computing as a threat to Bitcoin network? How would the Bitcoin blockchain be able to increase encryption strength compared to quantum computing?
Yeah, so there's several threats to Bitcoin, and quantum computing is one of those. Really, I'd look to answer that question with someone more technically competent to actually discuss the quantum computing. But my advisors that understand this subject, so the way that I look at it is, firstly, quantum computing would affect so many things. It's like when people talk about encryption, and if they broke the encryption behind Bitcoin, well, that breaks the encryption behind the things that are securing nuclear power plants. It breaks the encryption behind governments, and it breaks the encryption behind the banking system. So everything would, go down together. But how would Bitcoin react to that? Well, because it would be such a unanimous and easy thing to hard fork, you can imagine just implementing a different algorithm. So the issue with Bitcoin is when you want to implement a change that is contentious, and the very famous example is when some people believe that you needed to increase the block size in order to decrease fees, and others believe that you need to keep the block size the same so that you don't discourage the security in how many people are able to operate nodes. I don't want to get too geeky and technical here. But that was a contentious debate, and therefore it was very, very hard to get through. But in order to actually change Bitcoin in order to become quantum resistant, it would most likely, especially if it was a genuine threat, be a very non-contentious change. All the miners, all the businesses, all the community, all the users that can implement, if you get that consensus mechanism around that, then you can just simply fork Bitcoin, as has happened in the past, in order to actually fix any shifts that need to happen in order to be more quantum resistant. But also, if quantum computers, do attack, such things, then it can attack a lot more, and we have, a lot bigger problems as well on top of that. But I think Bitcoin would be one of the easiest things to actually change as a result, and we'll see how that space. But this is a slightly above my technical competence as someone that is more financially competent. And I look to my technical advisors there that have got many solutions and things in the pipeline in order to actually counter some of those things. Should a world exist. And the advisors that I know that understand these things, they think that that's a long time into the future before such quantum computing power. But that is one of the things on the threat list that need to be aware of, that makes Bitcoin slightly more of a high risk, higher return store of value than something like gold, for example.
So what can we do to protect our assets under a Biden presidency?
I'm going to give the cop out there because I don't want to give too little information to be dangerous. And as I said, I'll be releasing that 4-part video series of exactly what I'm doing and putting my own money on the line at the same time live for those of you that want to understand the answer to that question. And that goes beyond Biden. This goes beyond the 4-year cycles. I'm not building this based upon 4-year cycles. I'm building this about long-term building and protection of wealth is what the goal is for the retirement plan B. So I'll be covering that as shareholders will be getting the videos right after this. And then within a few weeks, everyone else, once we got the feedback from our Bank to the Future shareholders, we'll be releasing it to everybody else. So just go to retirementplanb.com and you can opt in, and we'll make sure that we cover everything. And that's one of the principal subjects, not necessarily just under Biden, as I said, but for the longer term as well.
Okay, this is more of a statement rather than a question. Politics and free markets cannot mix. Anarchism is the discussion that's heavily needed.
Thank you for that.
Okay. If CBDCs come, do you think government will control what we can and cannot buy, example, Bitcoins?
Absolutely, they will try and control what you can and cannot buy. But in terms of banning, we've seen more of a movement towards. So I should disclose I'm a shareholder in many of the companies in the crypto and Bitcoin space, many exchanges. And what we've seen over the last 10 years is more a movement towards regulating exchanges rather than outright bans. We've seen some more aggressive policy in China, but other countries, they haven't, they've really looked to regulate so that they can get more control over data on the onboarding and offboarding. But once you're in the crypto sphere, then you've got all the power of what Bitcoin can do. And I think Bitcoin has got the right mix between not having so many contentious things that is likely to be very aggressively opposed, and so really you get that mix. But will central bank digital currencies control what we can buy? Well, they already do control what you buy, but they do it via anti-money laundering policies with your bank. And so if they don't agree with how you can spend your money, right now you have to give documentation to the bank. And I know that this doesn't happen at the Visa, MasterCard level when you're making small, everyday expenses. But when you're doing larger transactions, you got to give everything. And if they don't like how you're spending it, it leads to your account being shut down and financial censorship as well. So that already happened. That's going to go on steroids when you make money one step removed. At least right now you have... under the existing model of fractional reserve banking, you have a you have a digital currency created by the private bank, backed by how much debt they lend out. So when you take on a mortgage, they increase the money supply, issue new digital dollars or digital pounds or whatever your currency is you're banking with, and then they create that new money supply. When you have that, at least that's one step removed. It's almost like a more free market solution to money creation. It just happens to be backed by the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme, and therefore crony capitalism in that. But when you turn it fully to modern monetary theory, and you have money being created directly, you can expect the censorship to go on steroids as well.
All right, thanks for that. How extreme would socialism be?
Well, so if you can, so when I wrote the book Bank to the Future, I talked about 5 outcomes under the current policy. And one of those was you can move to the most extreme, which is Marxism, which is a movement towards the illegality of private ownership. And the ability for the complete distribution of money under a government that controls everything. And if you don't have a monetary renegotiation, which I think we will have, then the inevitable consequence is a movement towards communism, 100% tax, and the illegality of private ownership of assets. That's the only way you can go if you continue this system in its infinite. So you have monetary renegotiations and financial engineering to prevent such outcomes. And so, that's how far it can go.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, have you heard of the rumors that after banks go bust, people might get offered all their debt erased, but for that to happen, they'll need to agree on getting vaccinated and also give up all their assets. So they have to rent everything in the future.
So I wouldn't call that a rumor. I'd call that more of a conspiracy theory or a forecast. And can that happen? Yes, it can certainly happen. Whether you connect the dots there or not, and whether that does happen, it may not play out exactly like that. But I do believe that you could have policies connected to actually being able to access certain money. And I think that it will be light touch at first, which is regulations of the airline industry, whereby they're not allowed to allow people to board those planes unless they meet certain criteria. And that can be connected to your digital wallet. And therefore that can be connected to your passport. And so you can have automated tax collection and all these different things. What was the beginning part of the theory? I think digital currency. Or have we lost the question?
I'm just going to, have you heard of the rumors that after banks go bust, people might get offered all their debt erased? But for
right. Okay. So this is what's So we have had debt jubilees, normally at the governmental level. So when you have countries, so we've had debt crisis events that have led to debt jubilees. This was the heart of the Greek crisis, more recently in the Euro crisis, and the Latin American crisis that we've seen in the past as well, which can lead to government debts being erased. Individual debt jubilees, these are theories. We have seen examples of things like this. I don't think you will see a debt jubilee because it's so detrimental to savers. And so therefore, I don't think you'll do that. What I think you're more likely to see is banks going bust, depositors being able to replace their money with a central bank digital currency, and the debts being auctioned off so that you have a transfer of ownership of who you owe the money to, just like you do under debt factoring at the moment, where banks actually just sell the debt off to somebody else and they try and recover money, and there's professionals that are in the debt recovery business as well. I think you could see auctioning assets of many of the debt rather than a debt jubilee, which would be very detrimental to savers and those on the other side of those. And it would also lead to ginormous systemic risk in the financial system. So I don't think a debt jubilee is on the cards unless you are a government, in which case debt jubilees can be done by cancelling out many of those bonds. And I think one of the things that could be happen during these currency wars is you could see, for example, this would be more likely under Trump. So this likely scenario has been reversed, I believe, under Biden. But under Trump, you can imagine Trump taking the Chinese government to court and saying that the financial impact is like $4 trillion on American as a result of you covering up certain information around this virus. You can imagine something like that happening. And then in exchange for settlement on that court case, they could claim to actually delete the 1.5 trillion of debt through those treasuries. And that would just be a few computer entry points in the Federal Reserve's computer database. I can see things like that happening if things get really, really extreme. I do think under Biden, we're less likely to see such things as they move into more of the status quo and kicking the can down a little bit further, and more hidden currency wars as we start to enter into these monetary renegotiations and a more global digital currency.
Okay, I think we've got room for one more question and then your final thoughts. So Simon, although the numbers have gone up in terms of subscriber levels, we also have to remind ourselves that there's a lot of people who are joining you, following you, and many of them are very new to the whole crypto space. So we've got a question saying, how will investing in crypto help the average person through the next depression? And your final thoughts, Simon?
That's a great question. And that's a really tricky thing for me to manage because many people are regulars and therefore they're familiar with the content. And it's really easy to, once you get in the grips of these things, to forget about the bare basics. And so it's really great for you to give us that feedback and remind us that sometimes we need to go back to the bare basics. And you do have these challenges. So a few things that I would recommend, throughout my YouTube channel, I've given lots and lots of content over the years. I guess there's a challenge out there for people that want to go back to that content and figure out a way of actually scheduling that in, because I have covered a lot of the basics there. We've been working on an animation on exactly what Bitcoin can do, just for people that are completely new to the crypto space. And that was designed to really, really focus on those that have no idea what Bitcoin is and how it can help them. We've been working on an animation. There's 5 very short videos that covers that. And I'll try and actually get that. Maybe we'll get links into that when we cover the 4-part video series, where we'll go through exactly what to do next. So I'm really thanks and grateful for that reminder. I'll try and get that balance right between getting the basics right. And I think really the AMA is the best way to get that. So don't be shy when you have these, when we do these AMAs, don't be scared of asking some of the really, really what others might consider simple questions. But we always try and get that mix right between those that are looking for more advanced content, and those are looking for new content. And also those that have the advanced content, often they forget the basics, and it's good to actually return to those. So 2 initiatives, the 4-part video series, retirementplanb.com. And I've got an animation that we're going to be releasing soon that covers the real basics of how to get into Bitcoin, why to get into Bitcoin. And then check out my YouTube channel, stay subscribed, and we'll make sure this is a constant evolving education for you. So we've got 5 minutes. Do you want to do one more question, or should we wrap it up here, Azad? I think you got onto mute.
These multiple screens, they get me going a bit doolally. Yeah, we've got lots of questions. Let me just pick one more.
Well, we got one more.
Let's do one more then, for luck. Yeah, I think this is an interesting one regarding gold. As you know, there's a lot of buzz that's happening around gold and the price going up. What about payment with gold on the blockchain? Is that a good compromise for sound money rather than cryptocurrency backed by nothing?
No, I'd much rather have gold than a gold-backed cryptocurrency, because it means that the gold backing the cryptocurrency would have to be held with a custodian, which means that it really defeats the whole purpose of a blockchain, which is censorship resistance and ownership of assets. Whenever you have to use an oracle, which is taking a price and pegging it to some kind of value, then you introduce new counterparty risk. You introduce products that can be subject to all the problems with that. And so a gold-backed cryptocurrency is pretty much useless in terms of owning your own money, spending your own money. You're much better off having some gold that you physically own and some Bitcoin that you own, and then hedging some of the exposure with holding those in custodians, but without actually doing that for yourself. So a gold-backed cryptocurrency, I just don't see how that helps move things forward. In terms of financial inclusion, it gives an interesting use case. But I do think that gold is great at what it does, Bitcoin is great at what it does, and the compromise produces a worst of both worlds product. So I guess we can do a bit more on that when we do the Bitcoin standard versus gold standard conversation. And no, the compromise I don't think produces a better product, but it can actually solve, other types of problems in terms of access, being able to divide, making it more divisible, which Bitcoin is really good at and gold is really bad at. So yeah, but it doesn't solve the problems that Bitcoin solves or gold solves. So thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. Getting a bit more political than we normally do, but I think the politics are really important. Ultra excited about getting that video series out for you at Retirement Plan B. Look forward, if you are a shareholder in banktothefuture.com, to get your feedback before we release it to everybody else. As always, thank you, Azad, for moderating. Thank you for your questions. Please do please do share, tweet this. Also grab me on Twitter at Simon Dixon Twit. If you've got any further questions, and leave those comments below. It all really helps, and really appreciate that. So always remember, no matter how bad it gets, you are alive at one of the most interesting times in financial history. And I want to make sure that you're on the right side of that change. As always, peace, love, unity, and I'll see you next week.